Well, it's time to start. Okay, so this is for 255 Merriam Street, continuation of the public hearing. Amendment to RGFA site plan approval. We have a number of
This is flexible
Yeah.
subdivision. Flexible subdivision.
oh, okay. Flexible subdivision. Sorry. What did I? Well, we have these, still have these to read into.
Right.
Correct, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start by reading into the record some communications that we've gotten, and they're not in any specific order except for what I have in my hand in that order. So, to the dated October 1st, Town Planning Board from Gregory and Sarah Albertine. Did I get that right?
We don't answer to anything resembling that.
Albertyn, okay. Sirs and Madams on the board. We, Gregory and Sarah Albertine of 261 Merriam Street, abutters of 255 Merriam Street on the north side, are currently in discussion with the developers, Hal and Jane Myers, regarding a solution to minimize and/or offset the negative effects to our property in the event that it is determined that the new driveway for the proposed back lot must be on the north side of 255 Merriam Street property. Such solution in concept will include certain easements and accommodations to our property from the developers, with the details of such easements and accommodations to be negotiated and finalized in due course. For the avoidance of doubt, the driveway is to be on the north side of 255 Merriam Street property. Our continued discussions with the developers would be based on scenario E of the number 255 Merriam Street conceptual site development and landscape plan. Okay. We'll probably hear more about scenario E. Dated September 30th from Lauren Chaplin to Betsy Ware, the town planner. Elizabeth, my name is Lauren Chaplin. I live and own 245 Merriam Street, Weston, next door to 255 Merriam Street. My house is an antique circa the turn of the century that I purchased about 10 years ago from my parents and invested in to rehab and bring back to its original beauty. I am writing to support the Myers with their latest proposal below, dated September 24th to you, with the driveway on the north side. I feel that now that they have the driveway away from the congestion of the pump house, barn, my driveway, and the Malone's driveway, and since they have better situated the proposed building on the property, that I can support the project. Thank you, Lauren Chaplin. Okay, and then we have a bit of a lengthy one here. And who's this from, and what's the date that it was delivered?
It was from, that's it, Jane Bybee.
From Jane Bybee, dated September 24th. And as of...
She's here.
Jane is here?
Yeah, I'm one of the owners. I was writing to Betsy Ware to answer questions that she had given us.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, of course. The, so I guess I should read this into the record for you.
I don't know how it's done, but last time it wasn't, if we needed to.
It's in the record anyway. I don't think you need to. It's fairly extensive. It's going to take a while.
It would take quite a while. It is in the record.
Okay.
But it was answers to questions that we had that we had posed to you at previous hearing, your responses to those. And we don't need to reread it because it's in the record. Okay. Who will be presenting at this time?
I'll just introduce, but most of the presenting today will be done by Eric Grunigan, the architect, and Jason Lavoy, the engineer. And they'll go over changes from last time, try to hear some of the comments we've received. One more global.
John,
Go ahead.
just for the record, we could just tell your name.
Jonathan White, representing the Myers Bibees, who were the petitioners.
Thank you.
One more global comment, just to kind of put something to rest. I wasn't involved in this, but I guess there's been discussions about possible deal worked out with the neighbors with respect to maybe purchasing the back land, also CPA restrictions on the property. My clients just, the economics on that just didn't work out. So that's really not going to happen. So we're just here today to proceed with with the proposed two-lot flexible subdivision. But I thought it was good to get that out because there have been discussions. I haven't been party to them. But I'm sure some of these neighbors were involved in those. So that being said,
Is that, you're saying, I think you said two things that are not going to happen.
yeah, there was a combination, two subjects were discussed, and I think they were both related to one another. One was whether or not a combination arrangement could be worked with both the CPA-funded restriction on the front of the property and the neighbors. I don't know if they would be purchasing the property or paying to put a permanent restriction and nothing happening on the rear lot. I was not party to the conversation, but just it didn't work out.
Okay, but that's not relevant to anything we've heard tonight.
Well, it's relevant only in the overall. I know, my understanding was there were discussions in front of the Historical Commission. There was some discussion with CPA.
I meant in terms of any of the emails that we received tonight that talked about negotiations with.
No, it has nothing to do with the Albertines.
That's-
If that's, no,
Right,
nothing to do with
that's
the
right.
Albertines.
So why don't we go forth then
Sure.
with your proposal?
Okay. They'll walk you through where we're at. One of the biggest changes you'll hear is the original proposal was for a 5,500 RGFA house on a 49,000 square foot lot. They're bringing that down. They're proposing to keep it below 10. I think we're talking 4,800. That having been said, why don't you walk us through?
So that was below 10%.
Below 10%, yeah.
Right.
Hello there. I'm Eric Grunigan, architect, I'm working on the project. And from the last hearing and feedback from neighbors and abutters and from the board, we've made changes in, this shows the changes that have taken place on Lot B. We have other drawings which indicate changes that we proposed as far as the driveway access to A and B, which I'll get to. And we've changed the house footprint, RGFA, which we'll get to after I first talk about Lot B. So the changes that have been incorporated into this plan since the last time we met really has to do with the house location and the development box, which we have, through a few iterations, we've been working the development box as well as the house footprint kind of down into this north west corner of Lot B, which is the flattest part of the lot and also sort of the existing lawn area. So this line here indicates the existing lawn area. We've reduced the development box from the previous design from approximately 8,500 down to 7,700 square feet. And as Jonathan said, we've reduced the RGFA in this design from 5,500 down to 4,800 square feet. One of the changes to the house concept here that's reduced the RGFA as well as limited a lot of the driveway pavement is to go to a two-car garage and a head-on access, as opposed to previously we had had kind of a side entrance garage and a motor court space in front. So in doing so, it leads itself into the driveway, which the discussion has gone back and forth with access from Merriam Street on what we're calling either the north side of Lot A or the south side of Lot A. In developing this further, pulling it down the hill, we've progressed with this north side driveway, of which we have two different options. This would coincide with, I believe you just read as option E. So this has had a lot of discussion with the neighboring Albertines. And the access point for the drive, since we've last met, there's an ash tree and a catalpa tree, which were both removed from the property. They were both.
Why were they removed?
This was brought up at the last meeting. There's a letter from an arborist showing it rotted.
The ash tree was rotted?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to see photos?
But this,
Sure.
I don't think, we kept the board aware of what was happening. In fact, our head of DPW was to make certain that it was private land, but beyond that, when we were in front of the board before, I think we presented the letter from the arborist on that, and that's the tree that lost,
Pardon?
then that tree loses.
Yeah, it dropped a gigantic branch in front of our house that was this wide and about 70 feet long. And you can see that the decay goes from the tip top of the tree all the way. I have photos showing 4 feet into the ground. It was decayed all the way through.
This,
Void of core.
I thought this was,
I don't recall discussion of it.
No,
I don't-
It was a time that I wasn't here.
Do you recall her discussing it being removed prior to
No.
granting approval of the flexible subdivision?
No, I don't, but
Me
that's,
neither.
But this is, we're
but
talking
the
back in
pictures,
July or
yeah,
so.
yeah.
yeah, and I know Jay kept Betsy aware.
We showed on the site walk, people, the split going all the
Now,
way down.
we understand all that, but I don't ever remember discussing actually having them removed at this time or prior to our approval of the flexible subdivision.
It's in the minutes. You can watch on the tape.
Betsy, do you recall?
The board didn't discuss it, I think the board knew about it and knew about the request to remove. Mrs. Bybee provided the DPW and Al with information and basically said that it was continued to be a problem and that she wanted to remove it. The DPW director made a determination it was on private property.
I was that close to the road. It was right in the brick wall. Not the brick wall, the stone wall.
Close.
But the bulk of it was on private property, so it was, a determination was made it was on private property and it was removed.
So that looking pretty.
It was quite rocky, yeah, I think you can see in the photos there. So the driveway in this, which we can call option E, we can call it option 1, but it reflects option E in the Albertine's letter. This has been worked on with the Albertines who live adjacent to the property. And the proposal here is to dedicate an easement of 10 feet that leads from the street back to the rear of the Albertines property, which would allow them, they're really restricted in driveway access. This is the driveway on the backside of the property. And it'll allow them maneuverability, additional parking, but its proposal is to be kept clear for that purpose.
Is it drawn on there?
It is not indicated on here.
We have, I have a checklist of the things that we had come up with of the agreement in principle, if you want me to give it to everyone.
Sure.
But here.
So it's under discussion.
Okay.
But
And also
basically
the
it's a-
advantages of the north
basically
driveway
it's a
placement. handout.
10-foot strip
Yeah.
running along the property.
Not quite to the end of the property.
Yeah, running up
Perhaps to the,
to
as
the
far as
end,
the back of the house.
to the back of the house, so when you come out of the garage,
Make a nice three-point turn.
you turn.
Or horrible driving.
So in this proposal, that's what's been under discussion with the Albertines. The driveway is then proposed in this plan to then cut into the tree line here, removing approximately 6, 7 of the existing trees in the buffer, and maintaining these trees in this area and leading along back to the rear lot. This is your preferred this is the preferred option for both the Albertines and for the Myers and the Myers.
And it's on the north side.
Yep.
There also some discussion, it'd be up to the Albertines, about having either a fence or, fence for a buffer or vegetative buffer with wall. That's still under discussion. That's what I understand. Is that a good
Discussion,
representation?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we don't have a specificity here of what the additional screening or buffer would take place in this option. But this is the proposed location of the driveway, which in this kind of redevelopment of the site, pulling this down, I feel that the north driveway is the preferred location to get through.
It looks like you're right on the property line, so how will you have room for a buffer?
We are, in fact, I think, within 5 feet of the property line at that point.
And you say this scheme is preferred to F?
I'll show you F. This is the preferred option worked out between.
Why is it preferred?
I believe, you can speak to this.
Yes, the Albertines have had a really untenable position with their driveway. It's right on the property line. They step out of their driveway, they're on the property line, they don't have any room for guest parking. They would like to be able to turn around in their driveway and come out facing forward for safety reasons. They would like to be able to have a flange so that they don't have a bump up and down. There's a dead stump that would be great
Wait,
to have
wait,
removed.
what does that have to do with the configuration of your driveway?
Because we're giving them an easement so that they could have a 10-foot easement to pull cars over to park, because they don't
Can you
have
show
any
me where that
parking the way that
easement
the
is?
old lots were cut.
It would be 10 feet wide and lead from Merriam Street essentially to the back of the house, so it would be in this area here.
And then,
But scheme B also has the driveway in that position. I mean, scheme B would also allow room, or F would also allow room for this easement you're talking about, correct?
It's a trade.
but the idea was that this way we get to come on that side of the trees, and there are very, very few mature trees anyway in there. There's 122 trees. There's over 100 Norway maples, and we're talking about getting rid of maybe 5 or 6 of the 100 Norway maples.
And
So
where are
it would be a
those?
very small percentage
They're
of trees
highlighted
would
in
have to
red
go.
in the driveway in this location.
There's not, she's not saying there's 100 on that strip, it's just.
Yeah, there are. And the
Strip
buffer
itself,
there,
in
and
the
the buffer
buffer.
area, I counted every single one and
Okay.
labeled them and spray painted them. There are 100 to 105 Norway maples, and there's 22 native trees.
It's basically a trade. The Debbie Myers would prefer this option, and if they could do that option, they would be willing, with the Albertines, to give them that strip so they can have a more functional driveway.
For us, it's simply, it just minimizes perturbation of the backyard for our Lot A.
And because you all have asked us time and again to come forward and forward and forward with the house, we now have an 88-foot buffer in the back for the Knowles and the Habers. We've come way down off the hill with the Malones. And so now then, what that's done is that's pushed the landscaping into our backyard. It's pushed, I don't know what the names of those boxes are, but they're now in our backyard too. And as a compromise, you know, as we're trying to give to you all as the planning board, it would be really nice to be able to have some backyard loft
That would
after
help. Jay, if
we
you would walk through
followed your
what's happening on the
recommendations.
site now with drainage and buffers, it'll give more of an overall picture.
So as Eric had mentioned, we were talking about the house with the development box. Because the house moved forward, what we were able to do was we actually took the drainage, because we were kind of thinking we had to be able to pull everything forward. We wanted to put the drainage on the Lot A, which now there'll be an easement. So we can't put the septic system off the property. It has to be on the property that it's using the actual septic system. So we still kept that on the property over here. But the drainage units for this house and for this driveway area will be placed on Lot A. So that allows us. Sure.
What is a drainage unit versus, I know what a
Yeah.
septic system is, what goes in the
So those are
drainage unit?
the underground recharge basins, they're concrete structures. And so based on what happens is, the development that we're gonna create, so there's gonna be impervious area from the house, from the
Right.
driveway, that kind of stuff. And so we have to offset the actual runoff that they generate. So what happens is you put these underground recharge basins, which they're stone and concrete, and then the water runs to them, stores, and then slowly infiltrates into the
Is this
ground.
off the roof, off
Yes.
the driveway?
Off the driveway, correct. Yeah.
So it's graded toward them?
Yes, well, it's
They're below
piped,
ground.
it'll be piped, and they're all below ground, so you won't see them at all.
If we could, I want to get them to get through with their proposal.
sorry.
They have two schemes that they want
Yeah,
to,
sure.
you know, we're using up a lot of time here. So let's move forward on
Yep.
this and then move to the next one and then we'll
Right,
answer
so-
the questions.
So from the last scenario, what Eric had mentioned, we had to move everything forward. So we pulled the actual recharge basins, put them onto the lot. They're gonna be in the easement, so now we were able to pull the house pretty far forward. As Jane had mentioned, what we have is we have the limit of work, which is shown in red, that runs around here. It's about 88 to about 92 feet off the actual rear property line is the actual limit of work line. The about almost 50% of the property is actually in the no disturb section.
The rear property.
Of the real property, correct. And then inside our limit of work, we're showing about 3,000 square feet of additional plantings already. So more than half the property is gonna either maintain the existing vegetation, or half the lot B is gonna maintain the vegetation, or gonna be new plantings. So we're thinking that this is becoming basically a pretty good scenario down the middle of what's going on, where we're taking the house, putting it down into the lower section, bringing the actual, which reduces the impervious area, took the drainage, which we're allowed to put on the adjacent property, and then tried to separated the septic systems, reserve area, prime area, to keep the disturbances down for the septic system. Basically for the driveway section, what Eric had mentioned is that one of the things that I think got lost in the middle of the north-south side is that the north side actually is much better for grading, which is one of the requirements that we have for flexible subdivision, trying to reduce the grading. There's extremely minimal grading for this driveway. So we can actually have very close proximity to these trees, and still, as long as we spade the trees, stuff like that, we can actually put this pavement in very, very close. We don't have to regrade almost anywhere on the project for that pavement. So by doing this, we're basically losing about 7 trees. 6 of them are Norway maples, so which are known as invasive species plants. So so that's the intent of this design, is that even though we are coming in through the trees, we aren't minimizing tree removal, but we are predominantly taking out invasive species plants. And then after that, the following intent is to basically then rebuffer this section, maybe put the fence along the side where you had mentioned that there isn't a lot of space to actually buffer up, and then also allow us to put buffers along this edge to kind of keep the actual, mitigate the actual screen, the driveway. We also kind of did a serpentine type of planting along this edge, so that lot line gets lost in the middle of this entire subdivision. No one really knows where the property lines are, you'll end up looking at the way the trees are set up, that it's kind of lost in the middle of everything, which we were talking about the last few meetings.
The other thing we've done, there was a comment last time about with the side entry garage lights shining on the neighbor. They've changed it, so it's a front entry garage.
Yeah. I figure we keep it simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just also too, that Barbara Malone had requested that we take out 2 Norway maples that are invasive near her property that are causing a lot of shade and hanging over her property, and that those are marked as being removed for her.
Before you go to, I mean,
Yeah.
whether we should even do the other scheme, this is a lot more than what we thought, but it's not a complete proposal at this point, obviously. It doesn't, you haven't finalized all that. Do we have some questions that the board has?
One more time, the gray area is a sort of buffer in between both properties. Is that
Correct. What we have is, so we have the red, which is limit of work, and then we have the orange, which is the actual limit of planting. So the gray is actually underplantings inside the existing vegetation along these edges, and then here is all brand new plantings in the lawn area. And same thing through here, these are all underplantings inside the existing buffer zones.
Any other questions?
First of all, aren't you proposing to remove some of the existing driveway?
Correct,
You didn't
on this
mention-
section right there, yeah.
Well, according to the plans, we were saying it's more than that.
Yeah, that was a mistake by me. This section actually was never intended to, that hatch was there by accident. So what happens is the idea is to keep the circular driveway in the front, remove this section and pulls out to that side, so this will end up being a full
And
circular.
that was in accordance with Susan Zacharias. She had pointed out that's a very historic configuration of the house, and that she liked that feature, and we do too.
Okay, another comment on the driveway is that, I understand everything that you said about it, but because of the curve, which is nice on the one hand, I can see where coming down the driveway, lights in the car are going to go kind of straight at the Broadnax's
Yep.
residence, and possibly the Carters as well. So just something to keep in mind when we're looking at scheme F.
Right.
But the last thing I'd like to say is that I looked at all the RGFA values that you sent for the nearby homes, but I can't seem to find the ones that I'm most interested in, which are the ones for the abutters. So, did I miss that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't see RGFA on here.
Yes, it's there, on
Where
every
is it?
single house.
I think it's on the next page, two pages with the photos.
Okay, good. And the size of that house you're proposing is 48, did you say?
Correct.
48.
So it's just under 10%. The lot area itself is 49,427, so we're about 150 square feet below.
So it's larger than every other adjacent structure except for the one at 251, which actually has 3 structures on it, and the one at 246, which also has 3 structures on it. All the others, or many of the others, are significantly smaller, like 1,926, 2,292, 1,506, et cetera. And when you just look at the size of the new house relative to the others, with the exception of whichever one that is, and yeah, it looks larger. So I'm still concerned about the size of the house. And I'm also very concerned, I don't understand why the building envelope, now that we have some idea of where the house could go, which is great. I mean, I think the location of the house is fantastic. I think it's great that the driveway is head-on now and you're not trying to go around it to the left. That's all good, and you're keeping the flat part of the site. But why does the building envelope have to be so much bigger than the house now?
The development
Yeah.
box, that's more, it's actually based on, this is the first time you've seen this house configuration. This has the ability, because we have the ability to push it back, pull it, that kind of stuff. I can bring that in, and what I did is I set it 5 feet in the front, and I just put it 20 feet off the back, as in case for like a porch or a terrace or something like that up the back of the house, if someone wanted to do something like that, that'll be part of the building. So that's kind of how that sets it up. It's not as if this the intention is to use that entire area. It's just that by keeping it 5 feet off this, there is gonna be some kind of porch or a terrace probably up the back of the house.
But, I mean, I would either want our certificate of action to state that the house has to go there, or to move the buildable envelope to be
Right.
within 5 feet of the perimeter of the house.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the house should be anywhere else. I don't think
Right.
it should be, to the east, which right now it can go like, I don't know, 20 feet to the east. And I don't think that we want that to happen.
Yeah.
So, still not sure, I still feel that the size of the house is getting in the right direction, but still a little too big, and then there's the buildable area.
And I'm fine with bringing that on, especially if we can discuss whether or not you consider a porch or something that's to be part of that building. If you said talking about the main building and we just put it around that box, then that's fine too. That's what I was trying to include.
Well,
in
you
the
also
same-
want to
some
know
kind of
patio.
expansion. Right.
Those
Stuff like
type of
that.
things.
Pardon me?
Patio would be considered, put a patio, the thought was with that big a box, you could put a patio out back.
It depends whether it has a roof on it. I mean, I think we could also look at 1 to 5 Concord Road for.
Right. And we had
guidance on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sue, anything?
Well, how tall is the house 255? How high is that house?
So the ridge is at 201.5
Uh-huh.
and the TOC is at 168. So it's
So, I mean,
about 34 feet.
the only
From the
thing
top of
I,
foundation.
I mean, I agree with what Steve said, is I'm kind of concerned about the height of the house in the rear. I wouldn't want it to be more than the house in front. Yeah, so that kind of,
What's the relative elevation between the existing house and the proposed house?
Sure.
yeah.
It's actually the house in the front, the grade around there, the front yard grade is at 165.
Yeah.
We're between 160 and 165. So the middle grade is be about.
Okay, so they could be, you could just.
It's actually
ridge
probably
at
gonna be.
34 max.
Yeah, by the time it's done, it's probably gonna be, it'll be most likely lower than this, because if you look at the natural grade for this, I think it's about almost 37 feet exactly to this house. By the time we did the average here, 37 feet would be lower because the grade plan's lower.
Just wouldn't want that house to be leaning over the.
Yeah.
Do you have some more?
And then, I'm still not sure how, so what happens in that little corner? I mean, I know that the pavement, or that, the crescent, that little part's going up. So what goes in that little corner? Just lawn or just low shrubs or
The
something?
10 feet we're
That-
talking
yeah,
or
that
beyond
little-
that?
Well, yeah,
this right
they're
here.
10 feet too, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think.
We're
the-
discussing
Is that-
the
is that later?
Albertine.
The discussions
Yeah, is that
before were
landscape?
what the Albertines wanted. If they wanted a buffer, they'll
Mhm.
put a very aggressive buffer.
Mhm.
At one time, I think it was your wife mentioned she liked to be able to look down the street and wanted it open, but
Yeah,
the thought is whichever they want.
You can't do too much there because there's a fire hydrant there,
Oh, yeah,
and the
okay,
fire department
yeah,
doesn't
small
want too much
space.
around it,
Yeah.
Fire hydrant's out the street, though. I assume you're, even if we have an easement, I assume you're talking what happens here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thought was if they want an aggressive buffer, give them an aggressive buffer.
Well, in what we've been doing so far, the discussions we've had so far, we're actually talking about minimizing how much actual visitation plotting is in there to give us the flexibility of additional visitor parking, intermittent parking. So something like gravel or seeding. something like that.
Yeah. And I thought you made an excellent point at a previous meeting when you said, these are historic homes and people like to see them.
Right.
And it's even a feature of the Community Preservation Act that you're not supposed to put too much buffer because people enjoy seeing those historic old homes from the street.
Just wondering about what the
Yeah,
frequency.
so we
Yeah.
heard that.
Okay, good.
No, be interested in your input on that, but just wanted to take.
That was my input.
From the Albertine.
Just asking questions.
Okay, so this is scheme scenario E, correct?
Yep.
Does the audience have some additional things they'd like to say about this, or should we jump on to scenario F?
Yes, I object to the northern driveway again, yes, still.
Could you
I'm
identify
Patricia
yourself for
C.,
the record?
254 Merriam Street, and this is my driveway right here. Okay? Now, I have been talking to people at the State House and so forth, and that could be considered creation with the 4 driveways of a hazardous intersection. And they have had a number of accidents all over the state in the last few years of driveways that face each other, and they are seriously considering making some kind of a bylaw to forbid it. So that's one thing. And then another thing is that in talking with Mr. Fogg, the engineer, he claims the town has no records of any property lines from Cherrybrook to the train station. And I told him he better go in and check again in Cambridge, because my land is certified and well marked. It was certified by the land court sometime in the 1930s, 1931, I believe. He claims that when the survey was done for this property, it had to be done based on these because there were no good markers on this property. And that allowed them to take the tree down and claim that this is their land, when in fact it isn't. And in fact, from usage here, it could be considered that the public have been using it more than 7 years, that the land and 5 feet in belongs to the town.
Jane, you want to?
Also, Mr. Albertson and I almost had a collision with my granddaughter a week ago. He got in his car and he was backing out, but we had already pulled out into the roadway. And if he hadn't been very quick to stop, he would have crashed right into the side of my car.
Well, I'm glad that that didn't happen.
Me
But
too.
we want to stay focused on, comments related to
Right.
this scenario.
And we from time to time back down that driveway.
Are there other comments on this scenario? Why don't you quickly do your scenario F and inform everyone about that.
So so lot B is actually identical. It's just the driveway location. So in this scenario, curb cut's in the same location. The driveway gets moved off the property line and actually runs between the tree line and the existing septic system. In this scenario, there's only one tree that's removed. That's the section right there. So there's about 6 extra trees that will remain. The buffers are basically the same. As I mentioned, this whole entire scenario up here is the same. This is more of a straight shot down, so there will be a view down the driveway, as opposed to, I know there's a lot of people who like to avoid that, especially on the scenic road. Basically, it's the same curb cut, 12-foot wide driveway, squeaking between the actual existing tree line and the septic system, and then out to the back.
It's the difference between the two is a trade-off. The Myers would prefer the scenario E, and that's why they were willing to give, the easement. Whatever scenario would go, they're still offering the Albertines, if they want a thick buffer, they get a thick buffer. If they want it kept open, keep it open on that side.
Obviously, it leaves a lot more room for buffer where in the other scenario it comes closer.
It does make it kind of, I totally get the Albertines and what Rosemary be backing out of that driveway. Just like Ms. Lady just said, backing out is really difficult on Merriam Street Food Board. And for them to have the ability to turn around and maybe head out.
But you can do that in either scheme, right?
I'm not sure you could do, they would not be able to do it on this
Why
scheme.
can't you do it?
Well, no,
Because-
because the easement's part of the other
Yeah,
scheme.
yeah.
Oh, the easement's not part of the scheme?
No,
Right.
there's no easement on this.
Why?
This is just a straight up.
Trying to make a
Because-
win-win out of it.
Yeah.
We're already like 35 feet off the
Well,
property
plus,
line.
with the buffer, the place that gets, let me show this for a second. The place where it gets very thin, there's nothing to buffer, frankly. But they can still put a fence there and try to do things to block lights, but once you get past this shed, it's wooded.
The shed is quite important
Yeah.
as part of the buffer
Yeah.
for, light pollution protection. In addition to some kind of fence, vegetation, or whatever we come to.
I guess I'd like to
Combination
know,
of.
sorry. I guess I'd like to know how the Carters and the Broadmaxes feel about the curved driveway. I don't know if they're here. No.
Knowing that the headlights would have an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Connie's never gonna live in the Carter house again. It's gonna be on the market pretty soon, so there has been no one to talk to. On that,
Which
I
house
guess
you
you
talking
talked to,
about?
you talked to the.
Crystal Ann, her daughter.
Yeah,
it's-
the middle house.
The Carter.
She has no plans to move back into the house.
Right here.
So I've talked to Connie, spent an afternoon with her talking about the plan. So you can get in touch with her if you need to. She's at the Waterstone retirement home, and she'd love to be updated on these plans. She feels really left behind. We've also talked to her sister, who flew up from North Carolina, to try to have her deal with the situation of selling the house. And her daughter lives in Colorado, she's reachable too, if you need those contact information.
I guess there was a conversation with the daughter, but,
But if you look at it, it's just about the smallest possible driveway incursion that you could possibly imagine doing along anyone's property in the back. And if you'll notice on the map, the very big mature trees are all going to be left there. You know, the ones that are along the property line that were the border trees are all left under this scenario. And, you know, I know that time and again, you all have made us very aware of, you know, the Norway maples or all the trees in general and wanting to save them. And once again, there still are gonna be almost 100 Norway maples left along that property line. And we're saving something like, you know, 50% of that lot. It's almost the size of a buildable lot in this district is being saved to trees.
Just,
We're not usually
we were,
interested in Norway maples, are
we
we?
were,
No, but if they're what you
we were
put in the tour
discussing,
trees, you're gonna have.
excuse me, we were discussing scenario F. Is there any other comment about scenario F from the board?
And how does scenario F compare in terms of removing, or not removing Norway maples?
Just for the driveway scenario, that's only one. There's only one.
One instead of six.
Yeah.
So you remove fewer of them
Yes.
in scenario F?
Yeah.
I mean, other than the straight shot to the house in the rear, I really don't understand the preference for E, other than the fact that they're willing to do an easement in E and not an F.
Well, it doesn't perturb our driveway nearly as much. We just won't feel like our driveway is broken up significantly.
Your driveway or
Our
your
backyard.
Backyard. You know, there's a number of reasons why, from even the perspective of our yard, we would want to do that. From the streetscape, it's much more aesthetically pleasing to have that curve than to have a straight runway like a jet taking off down the street. It's just not as pretty for an historic building. And the other thing would be, as you weigh, you know, this Norway maples, we certainly are planting many replacement trees. And when people look back at 10 or 20 years, as you, the planning board, the very name of your organization is planning. And you have to weigh certain things. And what is more important, that house is an attractive house that people really want to live in and value and treasure and has a livable backyard, versus Norway maples that the state has recommended you're supposed to take out. The National Park Service says that you're supposed to take 2/5 of them the first year, 1/5 the second year, and so on until you get rid of them because they choke out all the native trees. You could see it in action along that border where you have 105 Norway maples and only 20 remaining native trees. They're suffocating all of the native
We
vegetation.
understand that. I just want to give the board a chance to really sort of, you know, digest this and ask questions about it, so, you know.
Yeah. Roy, do you have anything? Go ahead.
I understand why they would prefer the driveway being further away from the house.
Well, it takes that further away in the backyard as opposed to the house.
Yeah.
And there's certain, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I understand. It just, I mean, I have to say, I mean, we sympathize with the amount of time that you've spent with plans. I mean, obviously, it's money, it's effort, it's time. And I think the difficulty has always been trying to shoehorn a driveway into this, just because of the geometry of the site. But Jonathan, I think you started with the idea that a deed restriction was out. And in my mind, the town still has to get something in return for granting a waiver for, in this case, the subdivision. And I'm just wondering what we're getting in return.
Well, certainly, and a couple thoughts there. Historically, on these special permit festivals, you haven't put any limitation in the special permit on the size of the house until Concord Road. We're volunteering to keep this below 10% for all time. So, you know, I think that's, given the past history of what this board has done on these type of projects, I think that's a significant concession, because then you're looking at a house that's always going to be below 10%.
But I think my concern is that the house that's presenting to the street is the old house. And there's nothing in this plan that would prevent someone from knocking that house down at some point in the future. The town doesn't gain anything unless there is a deed restriction on the house.
Some sort of historic.
We have talked about that with Myers and the Blythes about putting some kind of a design guideline, as we've looked at 1 and 5 Concord Road for the new proposed house on Lot B, but also doing something for the existing house that would, if something were to happen with that house, if that house were to be demolished at some point in the future, which we don't foresee, but some kind of a protective guideline in there that replacement structure would be in kind to what's existing there currently.
As would any, you know, if someone came
Any
in for
addition.
addition on the front house, put in Queen Anne Victorian style, would have to be Queen Anne Victorian.
I just don't see it as a plus to the town that way. I mean, it's preservation of the property or it's not. It can't be, in other words, a replacement that sort of looks like is in the style of. It either is a preservation of the structure or it isn't. That doesn't have to be the only thing. I'm just saying the town has to benefit in some way from the development, and I've yet to see something. I mean, we're seeing plans, and what's emerging is something that may be a viable plan. But I still go back to the original question of what the town benefits.
I would like to speak with that, because I feel like we've done more for that house than anyone could ever be expected to do. We've put $350,000 of our own money and sweat equity into preserving that house
Well,
without
that's
any
my
work.
point, and I'd like to
And so,
preserve
but
the house.
no, I'm going on from there. And if you look at that property, there's a number of different scenarios of what could happen to a big chunk of land near the MBTA. And there's no guarantee that if you have that much land, if you have this house from a real estate perspective on this piece of land, the house adds to the land. It doesn't make any financial sense on a 1 acre piece of property to raise the house.
So
And
what would be
so,
your objection
and
to
as
it?
far as the benefit to the town, I think the benefit, as I said before, is that you're following your own laws. You know, that we're within the laws of the state of Massachusetts and the country and of Weston, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be that every single, you know, thing, you know, that people are like giving gifts to the town. We're asking you to follow the laws, you know, right?
I'm missing what laws you're referring
But
to.
you're
it-
saying that
just
to
review-
approve anything, that
just
it would have to
review,
be of benefit
there
to
is
the
no-
town?
There's no by right to subdivide the property. You've proven that you can satisfy a density determination, but in order to do that, there has to be a dead-end road, and for that you need a waiver. And so there has to be inducement for the town, in other words, on account of this development, to benefit in some way or another. And that's what I'm referring to. And the
I'm
benefit
saying
could
this
be.
is the best possible development plan that I can imagine.
The benefit that
Any
I'm-
other
the most
development
tangible one is
plan I
the
can
house.
imagine
That's
would
what
not
I
be as
say.
favorable.
So the best possible development plan is no development, so in lieu of that, you might be able to.
But there are all kinds
What
of
I
other
heard-
development
What I heard
scenarios.
from you was you put up this money into preserving this house
Yeah.
and protecting it
And
and doing
it-
that.
that
Now, wait a
what
minute,
we've
wait a
done
minute, wait a minute.
benefits.
And what I heard from you is, if, why not a historic preservation on that house that you also want to protect?
Because it
I mean,
takes
none of us are gonna live here
financial
forever.
suicide for us. It would take away hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. We can't even put a shrub outside. If that house was destroyed by fire, we'd only get 80% of the value. of the
Maintenance and
home.
upkeep will easily
The
exceed
maintenance
six figures
upkeep
over the
could
next
be
decade.
100,000 over the next.
We could go on and
5 or
on why
10
we think it's not a
years
viable
of how
option for us
unfavorable that would be for
financially.
us. If it was something reasonable, to be honest, we've toyed with this because we want to work really hard with you, and I hope that's been so obvious. We've put in so much money on developing these plans, on listening to you, on listening to the neighbors, and trying to work it out. We had thought about coming back with you, to you with a plan of, we would be willing for the foreseeable future to, even without the town putting in a dime of taxpayer money, of guaranteeing that that house doesn't get torn down. The danger is if I say that and all of a sudden it turns from, the time frame of, my kids in high school that I promised to do this for you, to, then all of a sudden I worry that, it'll be like, well, we want this on there for 150 years or in perpetuity. And if there were something that you might be willing to listen to, and accept of like our guarantee, in good faith, seeing if you give us this favorable scenario with the driveway to us, we would be willing to say that we won't demolish the house in the foreseeable future, but it had to be a reasonable time frame of something that doesn't end up bankrupting us if we ever wanted to sell the house, if we do this unilaterally without accepting a dime of town money. But the danger is if I open up the door to that, I'm afraid that people will come back and give me a time frame that is suicidal to us.
There have been many properties in town that have deed restrictions, and they've been able to successfully sell their homes. The whole notion of a deed restriction to begin with is one in which the devaluation of the property is made up in the deed restriction itself. I mean, there's a benefit to preserving the house, clearly. It's in the interest of the town. And in my view, it's also in the interest in granting the flexible
Yeah,
subdivision.
but would you want that on your house? Would you want to not be able to replace a window or plant a shrub?
It's not a
And-
matter of that. It simply means there's oversight. That's all. And
But
and it sounds like you've done the right thing over the last, over the time that you've owned the house. And you clearly you've cared a great deal about the house. It looks terrific. And my point is I just would like to see it kept that way.
And we will offer you something in good faith back, free, without a dime from the town. If it was something within a reasonable time frame. If you think in the next 5 years that this house is in the most danger of going because of the construction and certainty with the back lot, I could say for 5 years, we will promise you just free, we will not demolish this house. If you want a bigger time frame than that, I would consider that, but it can't be like for time immortal. It would have to be something, we would be footing the risk of this, and I'd say, look, I'm in such good faith giving you this.
I think we ought to discuss it maybe further, but I think there might be something here. I mean, it just may be more information is necessary.
What are,
I just had one question. Could you clarify? You mentioned that there've been many these kinds of deed restrictions before, where really part of it is that the potential devaluation of the house is actually made up as part of that the deed restriction. What does that mean? How does that work?
We would agree with the town. I mean, the town would have to vote on this, right, because it's town money. But so it's possible that the town doesn't agree to something like this. But the concept is that if the owner agrees to the deed restriction, that there would be an appraisal done to determine the devaluation of the house, and that would then be granted in I mean, I think there's a limit to what it is, but I would just like to see whether it's feasible.
Yeah, we've looked at all the single-family homes that have deed restrictions, and we've seen how much CPA funds and money the town has given those homes, so we're well aware
Yeah.
of those numbers.
And how are you gonna ask us in good faith to go and get a CPA on that back lot when it's mainly Norwegian maples and it wasn't even historic? It used to be flat farmland, and they're saying, oh, you know, like a preservation in the back or something, or the community preservation in the front. It's like, we would have to go back, I've read the agreement, to like the very highest quality period. Do you know how much that would be for the columns alone? We spent $40,000 already restoring the
Well, we
front
don't have to go
porch.
through
It would be
these.
triple that.
I'm just asking you to consider it.
Yeah, and what I'm saying back is, look, I'm hearing you and I'm sympathetic, and if there's something that we can do that would be, you know, something that we could live with along the lines of what I said, we are more than willing to do that. You know, obviously, we put our money where our mouth is on this.
And I appreciate it. It's a
yeah,
beautiful house.
Thank you.
So, yes. I thought we had already done that. But do any of the audience have any additional things to say? Again, we're talking about scenario A.
Why is that not a pork chop lot?
Why does it matter?
It's against the law to create it. Against Weston's bylaws to create a pork chop
Jay, you
lot.
want to comment on that?
It's the, any flexible subdivision can be considered that. I mean, it's the whole point of the flexible subdivision. You can actually create lots without actually legal frontage from a flexible subdivision. You can do easements with the actual driveway. So it's, the function of the flexible subdivision is to keep open space, reduce the actual disturbances, reduce grading, all that, and then allow that kind of scenario layout.
But just like Roy was saying, they don't have to be granted. There has to be some incentives all around for why you would grant this. And I do think you've come a long way with your F scheme. I like it a lot better. But I think that I absolutely agree with Roy.
It looks like that's gonna be a common driveway, not one that's owned by the back lot.
Well, I'm not sure about that legally, which way it would be. I mean, they have their own driveway 5Es, but I'm very concerned about the future of the house in front. And if we give away the shop here and say, yeah, go ahead and do this house in back, and then we've just been on a regular
We're not going
basis.
to be doing that tonight.
Right,
In any
exactly.
case. What we've been asked is to sort of opine on these two different scenarios.
And I do like, which one is it? Is it the curved driveway?
This is F being shown. E was the first one, so you like.
Yes, I like, is it E?
E with the curved driveway.
Yeah, I do. Now I know that not everybody else does, but I do like the fact that, you know, it's a little bit, I think you can probably mitigate for the headlights.
E is what any landscape designer would ever recommend.
And I like it because of the
What are your
safety
names for the
factor that
record,
adds
please?
to your, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to not interrupt you now and answer.
All right, could you go ahead?
My name's Todd Joseph,
And you're.
And where do you live?
47 Partridge Hill.
So, and I was saying that I also like scheme E, scenario E, excuse me, because of the factor that you're basically getting a driveway you can turn around in and not back out of. That makes sense.
That could happen in scenario F too.
Well, if there was an easement, but that's not offered, you know, that could be offered as part of a trade.
I'm not.
You know, it's not the, you know, the historic preservation, but it could be offered as
That's
part
just
of.
to sweeten the deal for E, as I understand it.
Yeah.
But.
But E
I don't-
has other benefits in terms
Right,
of
I mean,
landscaping and planning and
I
stuff.
like E2 better, except for the headlight issue, and if that can be mitigated, or if maybe you care about the headlights.
We're talking about that. Yes. And that would not be part of the easement.
Yes.
Christopher C.
Could you
254
say-
Merriam Street.
I'm sorry.
Christopher C. 254 Merriam Street.
Yeah.
On either one of these, why does this section of driveway have to exist if you're going to keep the arch? Still very concerned about opposite our driveway on whichever scheme you keep.
You had mentioned the arches in terms of the historic.
Yeah, I like the circular driveway there because it keeps it open and you can see the house. To me, this whole entire exercise is about the front house.
Well, could the existing driveway that continues off to the left of the driveway, which you were going to remove, could that be how you enter the new driveway and not have that little continuation?
So turn this, pull the curb cut further this way?
Yeah, where it is now, and just get rid of.
So this would turn.
Right, could you do that? Would that help the seats?
It could, I mean, we could also look at what we're trying to do here is actually get a perpendicular alignment to Merriam Street here, because even with the tree gone, you still have to be able to look both ways. This
Right.
with the angle, it's really tough, you almost, to be able to take a left turn out is really tough, so.
Yeah.
But there's something we could look at.
I'm somewhat, I'm here, I'm parroting traffic people I've heard, so just parroting what I've heard a number of times that it's safer to have directly across than to stagger, because directly across, when you back out, if you do back out, I mean, hopefully no one's back out like this, you don't back, I assume you don't back straight across and go like that, but I've always heard that it's more dangerous to have staggered entrances than it is.
We sometimes back down that driveway.
Sometimes,
Go down this one?
during the winter,
No, ours.
we slide out during the winter.
It's a 45-degree angle down.
Now you don't have to worry about hitting the
Slide
tree.
out, so it might be safer.
Yeah, that's true. The tree used to stop
there's
us
two
though
big
before you
stone
wind up in New York.
So you get some runoff there. Susan, or would you say your name?
Susan Haber, 15 Bradle Road. I don't know if we're in the weeds yet, but I want to address landscaping tonight.
I don't believe they have any landscaping
We-
information for us yet.
We have some very general buffers, but as of right now, we were talking about,
We're trying to
Basically,
establish the.
yeah, a lot of evergreens, basically that's we're all on an evergreen understory, but nothing really specific yet, until we actually get a general consensus what's going on.
Is there a feeling from the board in terms of just scenario E versus scenario F? And not any farther in terms of any of the other things that we've discussed? Is there a consensus here?
Just a question, Tony Flynn, is that okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, 268 Merriam Street, just have a couple thoughts for you before you answer that. First is, Greg, you're not able to turn around in your driveway all the way through?
Sorry?
You're not able to turn around in your driveway coming past your house? There's no room to turn around right
Well,
now
yeah,
today? Okay, so I just want you guys to know, there is ability to turn around the driveway, just not in front of the house. The second thing is that this is obviously a tight fit, and it's a complex design, and I appreciate it. I really appreciate the work they're doing, working with neighbors, and your work moving the house forward and so on. I was going to make a recommendation, given that it's tough to imagine some of this stuff. One of the things I'm worried about is I live just across the street, and Merriam is a scenic road. It's really important to us all. And we want to maintain the semi-rural nature of Merriam Street, of course. And I'm concerned about the house in back looming, as was stated before, right, just period looming. And I'm concerned about the backdrop of a historical property. Even if it was agreed that the front property would be labeled historic somehow, in that event, I'd be worried about the backdrop to that historical house with a house in back of it. So a recommendation I have, or a thought for you guys, I've experienced a lot in computer-aided design, so this would be a great opportunity for the engineering firm to put a visualization together, a rendering, and you can actually picture these different scenarios. So you can say, look, from the road, here's exactly how it looks with that home. The detail you have to add that they don't have right now is the house, right? But you could choose a sample house, an example house, and place it there. And you can say, here's the way it looks from the neighbors, here's the way it looks driving down the road, and so on. I just want
That's
to
an
let you know.
idea.
Yeah.
That's an idea.
But
Because it's a tight,
we
it's
do
a tight,
normally.
tight cross.
Yeah,
It's
That's
gotta
much
get
further
some-
down the line.
Well, I'm saying,
We would see that normally
Gotcha.
as the proposal
Oh,
Gotcha.
you mean right
got
now, this-
farther.
when you're deciding between scenarios is all.
Well,
Yeah.
David and Roy and all of you, isn't that the normal thing you see in the site plan approval process.
Oh, that's what we just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you said farther down, I just wanted to clarify that that's the farther down that you're.
Farther down in the process.
Yeah.
We're still at a very early part of the process, so.
But I think it's an excellent point that you raise, and thank you for that. And that's something that we've been so aware of all along, of trying to preserve that beautiful streetscape of the barn and the pump house. And with this scenario, not only is it aesthetically not the runway look, but because it comes in and curves around, we have that pretty buffer there that is
Yeah.
going to buffer it from the street. Whereas if it goes straight back, it's harder to.
We've heard you.
Yeah, sorry,
We've
sorry.
heard you.
But I thought it was a great
Now,
point, thank
I want to
you.
get a sense from the board, do they have a preference in terms of a scenario? And again, not in relationship to any of the other tangents we've been down, because there's a lot of things still to work through.
I think that the curve scheme is aesthetically more pleasing, for sure. But the only question is the impact on the abutter, as Steve pointed out.
Scenario E, again, as long as the headlight issues are mitigated, and you have the buffer that you really need, even in that 5-foot wide zone.
I already went on.
You did, you
Yeah.
did, and I agree as well. So the board thinks your scenario C, of the two scenarios, it still leaves outstanding additional questions. And, in terms of when we get farther down the process. A planting plan would be very important in this scenario because of the tight fit that you have, that 5-foot strip where it bends in, and also then the lights going farther up and protecting those.
So you'd like to see a rendering of some kind of mitigating fence or something?
No, we don't need a rendering, we just need a detailed planting plan.
Okay.
Detailed planting
At
plan?
this point, in working with our landscape
But I
designer.
think we're really jumping ahead here on that, because I really think that something has to be done about the front house in terms of, before we make people go through all of this exercise and spend even more money.
Have you ever done that before in a flex? Require a preservation restriction? I've never seen it.
Have we ever had anything like this before exactly?
Well, you've done a lot of 2-lot, 3-lot
Yeah, but with this
flexible
particular
subdivision.
type, this is,
I'm just saying,
I think this
I've
is an
never seen it.
unusual,
It is.
I've never seen a preservation restriction.
yeah, but I'm not sure we've ever had any houses quite like this.
They're so visible.
I haven't read the whole decision. Did you put a preservation restriction on that nice humongous house on the Concord
No.
Road?
No, that was,
But it's also not nearly as visible as this.
well, and it's also 20 acres with 3 houses.
Mhm.
Down.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I
It's
just think this is,
preserved.
to me, and of course, I don't have the world's best memory due to my age, but this seems to be fairly unique coming before us. So that's before we all jump to and do
Mhm.
stuff, think about
I
it.
agree.
That's just my personal feeling.
And also there's the issue, for me at least, of the size of the new house and the size of the buildable envelope.
And that was my question. At what point, like, I think, I just personally, I'm Mary Lynn Hedison Flynn of 268 Merriam Street. So the size of the house at 4,800 is still extremely large for the lot and for the abutters. And so my question was just, at what point do you decide, how's the process to decide the maximum size of the house could be and how much it would be reduced?
Well, maximum size of the house is not something that we can actually dictate. We can cajole and we can negotiate and all of that, but state law doesn't give us that power. Okay, and
I don't think that's true in the case of the,
a special permit?
right, in flexible development, I mean, we
You have
dictate the
the
size of the house.
Yeah, we have,
In
absolutely.
1 to 5 Concord Road.
But that was the first time ever, right? And that isn't a
Was
failed
that-
plan. So there's really no
Oh.
precedent because that one isn't going to go, right?
One thing I'd also suggest there, the operator, keep it at 10. Yeah, it would be bigger than some of these houses, but I would bet you that at least one of those houses is coming down when it's sold. And I would bet you that all these other folks would not, would not want to see a size restriction put on their house. We're saying, yeah, we'll put a 10% size restriction on it. I bet you're gonna see, I bet you a cup of coffee, that at least one of those, you're gonna see a house.
I'm going
that's-
down, believe me.
Well,
coming down.
well, in excess of 10% of that lot once it's sold. They're nice enough houses, but they're time, they're not special historical houses. When was that built? The 50s, that subdivision? But anyway, the point being, the fact that we have a couple of quite small houses, that's a temporary situation.
To your question, where do we go from here? This hearing will be continued. There are some outstanding issues. We've given the feedback that you've asked for in terms of scenarios.
Very appreciative.
And you've heard also the concerns that we have, and you've heard, concerns that are still in the community. So those are things to think about.
Is there a mechanism, what Jane brought up,
Yeah.
and what she spoke with Roy about
Yeah, I would
regarding
like
some kind of
to
intermediate
continue that
scenario
dialogue,
between a preservation
between
restriction
Roy
and-
and Susan, because, we, as you know, put a lot into that house. We'd like to see it maintained, but we don't want to get killed and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt the rest of our life to do this. So, I also think to worry about the precedent of a beautiful home, and if you restore it, why should you be penalized? If everyone says, oh, you did such a nice job with that house, and now we want you to take a Community Preservation Act out on it because it's so pretty, we want to keep it forever, that feels like we're getting penalized for doing the right thing. And so I would like to please remember that and work with us. And is there something that would make you feel better going forward, other than the fact that it would be stupid on a 1.14 acre lot to take that house down? You do the numbers with and without the house of what the land is worth. It's worth so much more with the house on that size lot. It's not even funny. It's hands down. And I think that's your best protection, that that house is not coming down. And if there is something that we can work on with you over a reasonable time frame, where you don't have to pay us any money, we don't have to go through an uncertain process, with people voting at a town meeting, we will unilaterally make some assurances to you on that house within a foreseeable time frame, again, so that we don't have to take a huge hit on that.
So is there a mechanism you'd propose to sort of communicate that or negotiate that?
Let's talk about it internally, and then we'll communicate.
Okay, thank you.
And my thought on that is obviously that open meeting law, but I don't think that stops one of you, and Roy seems to have some strong feelings on this. I don't think that stops one of you from talking outside of this meeting with the Myers Bibees and seeing if something can be reached.
We would love to
in
talk
this
with them.
thought. Because if the whole thing kind of festers, till the next time we come in, it's going to be very
So
slow.
if there were two open meeting laws, we're still okay with open meeting law? Two members of the
Yes,
planning
because it
board?
was
No,
done
just
many
you can
times.
have one.
No, you can have more than one, you just can't have a quorum.
Get the whole.
It's two people met often.
That's right, you're right, you're right, we've had some of those.
So, you're willing to do that? And Al's volunteering out? Of course.
Can we understand what that agreement is talking about? It's a closed meeting or open meeting?
All of this would be open meeting.
Okay, great.
It would not be a hearing, it would be basically a conversation.
I don't even think that's subject to an open meeting. That's what I was getting at. But you can certainly invite interested neighbors to sit in. But I don't think it has to be noticed.
Okay.
That's correct.
It technically depends. If you have two members of a board, which is not a determining board, it's not a majority, but they're advising the whole board. then the argument has been made that you need to post those meetings.
But it's also gone the other way too. But in any case, so the way we're gonna leave this is, you're gonna talk with Al and you will contact them.
Yes.
And.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
That's
very
where we
much.
go.
Thank you.
Great, okay. We have the continuation to date certain.
To October 29th at 7:45
What, for this property?
for this property.
What time?
Is that enough time?
Is that enough time?
Yeah, absolutely, you don't have much to do. You haven't given us too many things to change.
Well, you're not gonna change, sounds like Susan's suggestion, probably good, let's not spend a lot of money and time on planting.
Doing stuff until you get the.
So we should have
You
this
get insurance.
discussion first. Okay, yeah, the sooner the better.
It does make sense.
Thanks.
And if,
October 29th at 7:45.
get us someplace. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate the great feedback, thank you. Thank you so much. Your comments have been so helpful. The last few meetings, we've really religiously tried to follow every single one of them.